Today, we're diving into one of the biggest mysteries hiding right in plain sight. Why does the world's most popular sport, soccer, stop at exactly the 90-minute mark? If you've ever watched a match, that final whistle is absolutely absolute. But where did that very specific number actually come from? Well, let's jump right in and find out. So, why exactly 90 minutes? If you're a diehard fan, or hey, even just a casual observer tuning in for the World Cup, you've definitely noticed that hard stop at 90. It feels incredibly precise, doesn't it? You'd think the duration of a soccer match must be the product of deep sports science, right? Like calculated to the exact millisecond to absolutely maximize human athletic performance. But the truth? The truth is actually far more accidental, and honestly, pretty hilarious. Yeah, let's shatter that illusion right out of the gate. There was no calculated scientific master plan to perfect the beautiful game. No scientists in lab coats deciding this stuff. The reality? It was literally just stubborn Victorian soccer clubs simply trying to catch a train home. I mean, I absolutely love this because it perfectly highlights how incredibly practical, mundane, everyday problems ended up shaping the massive global institutions we all know today. Part 1. A Victorian train schedule. To really wrap our heads around this, we've got to travel back in time a bit. Before the mid-1800s, English soccer rules were a total, utter mess. Just imagine going to a game where literally every single school in every city played by their own totally made-up regulations. Some local games would last just an hour. Others, they'd stretch to an agonizing 3 hours. Sometimes they just played until everyone got too tired to run, or literally until the sun went down and they couldn't even see the ball anymore. Just complete, absolute sporting chaos. But then, the turning point in sports history arrives in 1866. London and Sheffield organized this highly publicized match. The catch? London players were used to one set of rules, and Sheffield players were used to another. So, while they're standing around trying to negotiate the terms of how they're actually going to play the game, they hit a very strict, very practical limitation. The traveling team absolutely could not miss their steam train back home. So they compromised. They slapped a strict 90-minute time limit on the game, right then and there. And because that specific match was so popular and so well received, the Football Association officially codified this little 90-minute experiment into the laws of the game in 1877. Crazy enough, it has remained practically untouched ever since. Okay, moving on to part 2. The limits of endurance. We know the 90-minute limit was a complete historical accident born from a literal train schedule. But why did it stick around? Why didn't they eventually round it up to a neat 100 minutes, or even expand it to 2 hours once athletes got super fit? Well, the 90-minute rules survived completely untouched because almost miraculously, this random Victorian compromise matches up perfectly with human biology. To fully grasp what's going on here, we have to look at what is actually happening to the human body out on the pitch. Soccer, fundamentally, is a sport of continuous movement and high-intensity interval sprinting. To put that intense demand into perspective, an elite modern professional midfielder runs an astonishing 10 to 14 kilometers. That's about 6 to 8.5 miles every single match. Just think about that for a second. It's basically like running a 10K race, but you're constantly changing direction, getting tackled, and randomly sprinting at absolute top speed. And that brings us right to the actual science of it all. From a sports science perspective, 90 minutes is right at the bleeding edge of what the human body can actually sustain at an elite level. And this all comes down to glycogen depletion. Glycogen is basically your body's primary fuel source for high-intensity exercise. It's your stored carbohydrates. And guess how long those stores typically last before totally running out? Yep, exactly about 60 to 90 minutes. So right around that 90-minute mark, players are literally hitting a biological wall. Their main fuel tank is just running dangerously low. So the real kicker is what happens if we decide to ignore biology and push past that mark? Like if games regularly went to 120 minutes every single weekend, we actually wouldn't be getting more entertainment out of it. We'd really just see a drastic drop in the quality of play in that final half hour. Players would be super sluggish, making sloppy mistakes, but far, far worse. We would see exponential increases in muscle tears, severe fatigue-related injuries would totally spike. So keeping the game at 90 minutes doesn't just keep the sport highly competitive, it literally protects the players. Part 3. Fair play and foul weather. Okay, so the overall 90-minute duration makes total biological sense, even if it did start as a total accident. But that brings up another really fascinating question. Why do we split those 90 minutes into 2 totally precise 45-minute halves? Like, why not just play straight through the whole time? To figure this one out, we actually have to go right back to the 1800s. And frankly, we have to look at the miserable English weather. Back then, pitches were rarely perfectly flat. They definitely weren't those beautifully manicured grass carpets we see in modern stadiums today. They were rough, they had hills. This meant a heavy gust of wind, a blindingly bright sun, or a terribly muddy slope could totally ruin a team's chances. It could give their opponents a massive game-winning tactical advantage. Think about it. If you play straight through, one unlucky team gets the wind blasting in their face and has to run up a muddy slope for the entire game. It's just totally unfair. So by splitting the game exactly in half at 45 minutes and forcing teams to switch sides, officials ensured perfectly balanced fairness. This way, nobody had to suffer the bad end of a sloping pitch or brutal weather for the entire match. It leveled the playing field. I mean, quite literally. Part 4. The clock keeps ticking. Now that we know why it's exactly 90 minutes and why it's split perfectly in two, let's look at how this all wraps up. To really fully appreciate the genius of this Victorian compromise, we have to look at how soccer handles its clock, especially compared to the modern stop clock sports we're so used to seeing today. So soccer features a continuous clock. The official time is 90 minutes, but the real-world duration is really only about 100 to 105 minutes. Why is that? Well, because the referee keeps time directly on the field. Instead of pausing the clock for every single foul, injury, or crazy goal celebration, they just tally up all that wasted time and tack it on to the very end as stoppage time. Now, just compare that to American football. You've got 60 official minutes on paper, right? But the real-world duration stretches well over 3 hours because of all that constant stopping and starting of the clock. The time gap here is absolutely massive. A soccer match wraps up nice and tidy in just under 2 hours. At around 105 real-world minutes, it is completely dwarfed by an NBA basketball game sitting at 2.5 hours or an NFL game dragging on for a massive 180 minutes, or even more. That continuous clock prevents the massive duration bloat that you see in pretty much every other major sport. And what does all of this mean for us today in the modern era? Well, it means the 90-minute limit accidentally fits perfectly into a modern television broadcast window. It gives us fans a briskly paced, completely action-packed game without hours of commercials constantly interrupting the flow. Ultimately, this random 19th century train schedule compromise accidentally created the ultimate blueprint for modern sports broadcasting. It delivers constant, engaging action without keeping players out there until their bodies literally collapse. It's honestly just amazing how a quick, stressed-out negotiation to catch a steam train shaped the daily habits of billions of sports fans over a century later. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. The next time you're on the edge of your seat watching that tense 90th minute stoppage time tick away on your screen, ask yourself, how many other strict global rules governing our daily lives are really just historical accidents? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the world around you, and I will catch you next time.